Well, welcome to our third program for 2025. I believe we have a speaker and a great topic of interest to many. I um, I came upon Mr. Appleton's program on the internet, and I knew Ray Appleton. Somebody of you may have heard about him, heard of him. Well, and Mr. Appleton's last name is what grabbed my attention, so, I won't bore you with any stories about Ray. Anyway, we have a program tonight on heraldry. That is the study of, family coats of arms. Mr. Appleton has been researching and teaching about heraldry for over 40 years. This is ongoing interest has taken him across the United States and Canada and to Europe to participate in and speak at symposia on the subject. He is an associate member of the Academia. Not gonna pronounce this, Mr. Appleton. Fellow of the American Heraldry Society, a fellow of the International Association of Amateur Heralds, and a member of the Royal Heraldry Society of Canada. He regularly participates in a number of heraldry, lineage, and genealogy related online groups. Would you join me, please, in welcoming David B. Appleton?
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm assuming you all can hear me okay.
Yes.
Super, super. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry we got started a little bit late. The technology is always wonderful until it doesn't work quite right. In any event, let's get started here. In speaking about heraldry and genealogy, author L.G. Pine has said, "At the outset, there is a curious fact in the relationship between the two subjects. While students of heraldry do take the genealogy and acquire a considerable knowledge of it, those who begin as genealogists seldom, if ever, take any interest in heraldry. This is most unfortunate because the two subjects are necessarily connected. Tonight, I hope to show you a little bit about that connection and how heraldry can sometimes become the genealogist's most colorful tool. But first, what images come to your mind when you see or hear the following terms? Heraldry, family crest, coats of arms. Do you picture something that's just for kings and queens? Do you envision a coat actually made of arms? Or knights in shining armor? Well, coats of arms, heraldry, are often associated with knights on horseback, often in quite romanticized situations. But in fact, identification of knights on the field of battle and in the arena of the tournament was one of the earliest uses of heraldry. But what is heraldry really, and why should we as genealogists care? Heraldry has been defined a number of ways over the years, all of them at least partly true, and each of them probably incomplete. It has been called the science of fools with long memory. It has also been called, and this by a herald who worked in the College of Arms in London, a study which loads the memory without improving the understanding. A very enthusiastic and somewhat highfalutin, but not very helpful definition calls it an exuberant union of family, art, and history. Here's a very long definition from Parker's Glossary of Terms Used in Heraldry. It's not terribly enlightening. It's really like saying that engineering is what engineers do. It's accurate, but not informative. What do engineers do? Or in this instance, what do heralds do? At its core, heraldry is designs painted on shields and used to identify the owner. Even more specifically, and more important to us, it is the systematic use of hereditary devices centered on the shield. So we know that it's systematic, there's a system to it. It's hereditary, and it's about things painted on shields. At its very simplest, heraldry is pictorial genealogy. A coat of arms states every bit as much as a signature or a name tag might that I am so and so, and by extension, I belong to such and such a family. It is effectively a graphic name tag, the medieval equivalent of a photo ID. Now, heraldry has its own specialized language, which is used to recreate the picture from a verbal description. If you're going to be doing a lot of heraldic research, it might be helpful to know some of this. But this presentation is an introduction. I hope to keep it as free from jargon as possible. Where I do end up using some of the specialized terms, I'll try to define them as we go along. If you're really interested in that part of it, we can hang out later and say things to each other like gules, 3 lions passant gardent in pale or d'azur à 3 fleurs de lis d'or. Now, the history of identifying insignia that heraldry is based on goes back literally thousands of years, at least as far back as the Bible. When the Israelites were on the exodus from Egypt to the Promised Land, they were grouped by tribes, each tribe having its own special emblem. These emblems were, of course, based on the blessings of Jacob to his sons. The ancient Greeks, too, carried symbols on their shields, which allowed them to be identified on the field of battle, or misidentified, as when Patroclus wore the armor of Achilles at the Battle of Troy. The men accompanying William the Conqueror in his invasion of England in 1066, shown here in the Bayeux Tapestry, bore various geometric and animal designs on their shield. But none of these were considered heraldry, as they were either not individual, not hereditary, or not permanent, being changeable at the whim of the owner. All of this changed in the last half of the 12th century. The first generally acknowledged use of heraldry is when the shield, the coat of arms of Geoffrey, Count of Anjou, who was the father of King Henry II, was borne by his grandson, William Longspay, the Earl of Salisbury, half-brother of Richard the Lionheart and Prince John of the Robin Hood stories and the King John who signed the Magna Carta. But the use of heraldry was not just for kings and princes. Others who have used coats of arms have included explorers and discoverers like Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus, adventurers like Sir Francis Drake, scientists like the astronomer Galileo Galilei and the physicist Isaac Newton, even writers, including the best-known author in the world, William Shakespeare, helped his father John obtain a coat of arms from the heralds in England, which of course he later inherited. So not just kings and queens and knights in armor have had heraldry. In 1776, when America rebelled against British rule and British rulers in the person of King George III and his fancy coat of arms, were we also rebelling against heraldry in general, British or otherwise? George Washington himself has said, "It is far from my design to intimate that an opinion that heraldry, coat armor, etc., might not be rendered conducive to public and private use with us, or that they can have any tendency unfriendly to the purest spirit of republicanism. On the contrary, a different conclusion is deducible from the practice of Congress and of the states, all of which have established some kind of armorial devices, to authenticate their official instrument. Indeed, the Congress had, in fact, established some kind of armorial device, the arms of the United States of America. The coat of arms is the shield on the eagle's chest. These arms appear in the United States on common currency. Look at the back of a $1 bill sometime. You will find the arms of the United States there. Now, besides the United States and the individual states, individuals throughout the history of the United States have used heraldry. In fact, George Washington himself bore a coat of arms inherited from his ancestors in England. Washington's contemporary, Light Horse Harry Lee, and his slightly more well-known son Robert E. Lee also used a coat of arms. Though I have to admit, my favorite part of the Lee coat of arms is that little squirrel up on top doing what squirrels do. When Dwight D. Eisenhower was made a member of the Order of the Elephant in Denmark in 1945, he had to acquire a coat of arms for display in the order's chapel. After consultation, he chose a gold shield with a blue anvil. He added a crest, the 5 stars of 5 points, recalling his rank as General of the Army, and a motto, peace through understanding. On St. Patrick's Day in 1961, President John F. Kennedy was presented a grant of arms from the Chief Herald of Ireland by the Irish ambassador to the United States. When he was governor of California, Ronald Reagan adopted an elaborate coat of arms supposedly traced from powerful Irish aristocrats. When he discovered that he was not descended from this family, he had Adolf Karlovsky of the International Academy of Heraldry devise a new coat of arms, which was registered in 1984. And in 2004, Colin Powell, then the Secretary of State, obtained a grant of arms from the Lord Lion King of Arms in Scotland. So what has all this got to do with genealogy? Well, John E. Cusins, in his Handbook of Heraldry, said, "Many are the incidents but faintly written on the pages of history, which would have forever remained dark and illegible, but for the light flashed on them by the torch of heraldry. A shield of arms, a badge, or a rebus, depicted in a glass window, painted on a wall, carved on a corbel or monument, will frequently indicate with unerring precision the date to which such relics are ascribed and whose memory they are intended to perpetuate, when all verbal descriptions are wanting. And the identity of many an old portrait rests on no other authority than that of a coat of arms painted at the side." Indeed, the discovery of a coat of arms on a family heirloom or in a relative's attic may provide clues to ancestors and relationships that would not necessarily be as easily found or noticed in traditional genealogical research. So, in what way can heraldry provide clues and be a tool for genealogists? Well, while seldom as definitive as a birth record or a marriage certificate, it can lend weight and act as a guide to avenues of research. Firstly, because coats of arms are borne by individuals, it can identify those individuals and sometimes identify milestones in their lives. As a case in point, published in an English genealogical magazine, we have the story of Anne Sadler, a lady who had a portrait of an Elizabethan gentleman about whom she knew only that he was said to be 55 in 1603. The painting had a coat of arms on it. By researching the coat of arms, she was able to learn that it was a portrait of Timothy Lowe, a lawyer at Lincoln's Inn, London, who was born about 1548, making him 55 in 1603, and who was knighted on the accession of King James I to the throne of England in 1603. The portrait was presumably painted to commemorate that important milestone in his life. Second, because coats of arms are passed down from generation to generation within a family, they can give clues to family lines and relations. If, for example, you find 2 or hear 3 individuals of the same surname living many miles apart, but bearing the same or very similar coats of arms, the chances increase that these individuals are in fact related to each other. On the other hand, if you have two individuals living very near each other, but bearing completely different coats of arms, the odds are that they are not related, even though they share a surname. Third, because arms are frequently modified in specific ways for junior branches of a family, it is sometimes possible to determine through which son a coat of arms has descended. Both the English, as shown here, and the Scots use specific, though different methods of indicating whether the arms are those of a first son, a second son, a third son, and so on. It is sometimes possible to trace through several generations using such what are called cadency marks. Fourth, because of the way in which coats of arms are marshaled, that is, combined with other arms onto a single shield, it's possible to trace alliances by marriage with other families. If a man who has a coat of arms marries a woman whose father also bears a coat of arms, the married couple may combine the two coats onto a single shield, as this one did here. There's a very faint line down the center there with the husband's arms to our left and the wife's arms to the right. It is possible to obtain clues as to family lineages and marital alliances this way. We may be able to identify the marriages of husbands and wives through several generations, or the surnames at least of families which have married into a family with a particular coat of arms. Here, for example, are the heraldic evidences of a number of marriages in the Turberville family of Dorset, England. Now, in the British Isles, England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, if a woman whose father has a coat of arms has no brothers, she and any sisters she may have inherits the father's coat of arms. Her husband may then place her arms on a small shield in the middle of his own arms to show that both he and his wife are passing arms down to their children. Their children will then combine their parents' arms in a process called quartering, dividing the shield into four parts, their father's arms being in the upper left and lower right, and their mother's arms in the upper right and lower left. And this can happen more than once in a family. In the example here from a stained glass window, the wife's arms are already quartered, indicating marriage to an heraldic heiress sometime previously in her family. Now, if this happens enough times in a family, you might find a shield something like this, having 48 quarters. Fortunately, this is pretty rare. But by knowing the rules by which arms are inherited and combined, it's possible to glean clues as to family lineages and marital alliances. Now, the different parts of an heraldic display, called an achievement of arms, can hold clues for us as genealogists. To help you understand what information an achievement of arms may have, we'll discuss these various elements individually to see what they can tell us, and in many cases, how they relate to the parts of a knight's actual accoutrement. The single, central, essential element of an achievement of arms is the coat of arms. The colors of the shield and the charges, geometric shapes, or the representations of birds, beasts, and other things on the shield. The shield, the coat of arms, may stand alone with no other embellishment. Indeed, a shield alone is probably the most common way that coats of arms are seen. Anciently, the arms were borne on an actual shield carried by a knight into battle. They were also worn on the tabard or surcoat worn over the knight's armor, hence the term coat of arms. Frequently, there are other accessories that accompany a coat of arms. There will often be a representation of some type of helmet. The type of helmet and the direction it faces may give us clues as to the rank of the owner, whether a gentleman, a knight, a peer, a prince, or a king. Based, of course, on the knight's helm, a protection for the head. Now, sometimes between the shield and the helmet above it is a type of crown or coronet. Where such a coronet appears, its type will indicate the rank of the armiger, the owner of the coat of arms, whether prince, duke, earl, baron, and so on. This, for example, is the coronet of a French count. Attached to the helmet is mantling, a colored cloth draping around the helm and sometimes around the shield as well. This mantling began as a short cloth protecting the helmet from the direct rays of the sun, especially useful to European knights on crusade in the Holy Land, but has in the years since become more and more intricately involved, often appearing like leaves or vegetation of some sort surrounding the helmet and shield. The mantling is usually held on by a wreath or torse. The torse originally consisted of two hanks of twisted silk or cotton, usually the same colors as the mantling. And here we have an example of the torse on an actual knight. Now, neither the mantling nor the torse really gives us any genealogical information. They're mostly for decoration. Some arms do not have a torse, but rather a type of crown that is called a crest coronet. Unlike the coronet of rank sitting atop the shield, this type of coronet does not tell us anything about the rank of the owner. It is merely a fancy substitute for the torse. And issuing from or sitting on top of the torse is the crest. Originally, these were fanciful beasts and birds and monsters or other elements made from boiled leather or carved from wood, painted and affixed to the helm, the attachment hidden by the torse. Crests often, but not always, pass down in a family from generation to generation the way coats of arms do, but they can thus be of assistance in tracing family line. Crests are rarely seen alone without the shield, helm, torse, and mantling. The main exception to that general rule is on silverware, where because of the lack of space to engrave a full coat of arms, there may only be a crest and torse shown. Below the arms, or above the crest in Scottish arms, on a ribbon or scroll is a motto. Mottos come from several traditions. Some of the oldest were war cries. Others are a pun on the surname. The majority simply express a sentiment, a hope, or a guiding principle. Most are in Latin, but they may appear in nearly any language. Like crests, mottos are often passed down through family lines, but are sometimes changed at the whim of the owner. Sometimes, depending on either the antiquity of the arms or the rank of the owner, a coat of arms may be held up or supported by usually two, but sometimes, as in the case of the arms of the United States, only one supporter. These are usually human figures, beasts, birds, or fanciful monsters, holding the shield of the coat of arms upright. The supporters often stand on some sort of ground called a compartment. Sometimes the plants or rocks or even water drawn on the compartment may lend clues to geographical sites and locations. Combine all of the individual elements and the fully colored achievement of arms is impressive indeed. Now, you will not necessarily find all of these elements in a heraldic display, but it does help to know what they all are and which parts may have useful clues for genealogical research. Now, sometimes you'll find a display that includes other armorial insignia. If an armiger is a member of an order of knights, the insignia or collar of that order, or orders if there is more than one, as in the example here, may surround the shield. Such orders almost always keep records of their members, including names, dates, and other genealogical information. Sometimes the insignia of other military awards or medals may also appear hanging from ribbons or circlets below the shield. Such medals can also suggest avenues for additional research. Now, heraldry has been called the genealogist's most colorful tool, consisting as it does of painted shields and figures. But when you only find a black and white line drawing of a coat of arms or a coat of arms engraved on a silver plate, as may often be the case, how can you determine the colors it is supposed to be? Over the years, heraldic artists have devised a couple of ways of doing this. One method is called tricking. In this system, the colors used are written on the drawing in abbreviated form. Thus, we can know that this coat of arms should be colored in like this, with the horizontal band across the center black and the 3 lions' heads in red. But because it relies on language for its interpretation, it can sometimes be a little confusing. For example, S in English stands for sable or black, but in French it stands for sinople, which is green. And in German it stands for silber, which is silver or white. So you can see that this system can have certain drawbacks to its use. The second and more popular method is hatching, which was developed in the 17th century and involves dots or a series of lines in varying directions to indicate color, thus bypassing the problem of having to know which language the artist speaks in order to interpret them. By deciphering these lines and dots according to the standardized chart, we can know, for example, that the arms here should be colored like this. Now, there are 2 basic ways to identify coats of arms. One is by the surname of the person to find the arm. The other is by the shield and the charges and colors on it to find the name. An armorial is a book which lists coats of arms, sometimes from a specific city or region, sometimes from many nations, organized by the surname of the owner. Sometimes it is paintings of the actual shields which are shown, as in this armorial, which is in the form of what is called a roll of arms. More commonly, an armorial will give the name of the person and then a verbal description, called a blazon, of the arms. 2 of the most widely used armorials today are Burke's General Armory of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, containing some 60,000 coats of arms, and Johann Baptist Rietstop's Armorial General, twice that many coats of arms from all over Europe. There are also several armorials of heraldry used here in America. You will find all of these books listed in the suggestions for further reading handout. Now, an ordinary is a book which also lists the coats of arms, but which organizes them by the charges on the shield. In this way, it's possible to take a picture or drawing of a coat of arms and find at least the surnames and sometimes more of the person who bore the arms. The most commonly used ordinaries are Papworth's Ordinary British Armorial, the Dictionnaire de Crests, which is an ordinary of the Arms and Rietstop's Armorial General, and then an ordinary of arms contained in the Public Register of all arms and bearings in Scotland. And then finally, for the oldest English coats of arms, the Dictionary of British Arms, sometimes called the New Papworth. Also useful is a book called Fairbairn's Book of Crests, which lists crests accompanying the coats of arms in Great Britain by both surname and by the crest itself, making it effectively both an armorial and an ordinary of crests. Fairbairn's also includes many mottos, which may also help to identify a coat of arms. There are also, particularly useful to those doing research in their English ancestry, the voluminous records and notes of the coats of arms made by the heralds of the College of Arms during official visitations, which took place during the 16th and 17th centuries. Many of these records have been published and contain not only heraldry, but also lineages and sometimes other genealogical information. But the visitations themselves are worth a whole other presentation, and it goes a little bit beyond what we're trying to do here today. So, knowing all of this, how does all of this information work to help us identify a coat of arms and the person who owned them? Here's an example of the process by which we can identify the owner of a coat of arms. Here, I had actually found this achievement of arms that was simply marked with the surname Fraser. Now, from the style of the arms shown here alone, the stylized flowers and the ships on the shield, both of which are common in British heraldry, but fairly uncommon in European heraldry, we suspect that he is Scottish or English. We can tell from the coronet of rank immediately above the shield, right here, that he is or was an English marquess. He has supporters on each side of his arms confirming that he is a British peer. The peerage includes dukes, counts, and earls, viscounts, marquises and marquesses, and barons. The helmet, silver with gold bars and facing to the side, is also that of an English or Scottish peer. The crest at the very top is a fairly complex one, not the sort of style one would expect to see much before the 16th century. And then surrounding the shield is a blue belt or garter with the words "Honi soit qui mal y pense." This is the insignia of the English Order of the Garter. A little research in one of the books we discussed, Papworth's Ordinary British Armorial, and we find that these arms are associated with the name Hamilton, not Fraser. Double checking in Fairbairn's crest, we find the crest and motto, also attributed to the Duke and Marquess of Hamilton. Now, looking up Hamilton in what I affectionately call the Big Book, because it is almost 6 inches thick, Burke's peerage under the name Hamilton, we find John Hamilton, 1535 to 1604, the third Earl of Arran. Aha! Arran is in Scotland. Was created the first Marquess of Hamilton in 1599. John's only son, James, succeeded his father in 1604 as the second Marquess of Hamilton. He was also, in June 1619, created Earl of Cambridge in England and made a Knight of the Order of the Garter. James's eldest son, also James, was created the first Duke of Hamilton in 1643 and became a Knight of the Order of the Garter at that time. Unfortunately, he was beheaded just 6 years later and was succeeded by his brother William, who became the second Duke of Hamilton. Now, because the earlier Earls of Arran and later Dukes of Hamilton would have used a different coronet with the arms, the man we are looking for would have to have been either John Hamilton, the first Marquess, his son James, the second Marquess, or his grandson James, the third Marquess, who was later made the first Duke of Hamilton. As John, the first Marquess, was not a Knight of the Garter, it can't be him. As the grandson, James, the third Marquess, was not made a Knight of the Garter until he was also created the first Duke of Hamilton. So the arms here must be those of James Hamilton, second Marquess of Hamilton, born 1589, who succeeded his father in April 1604 and died March 2nd, 1625. So, having learned what the various parts of a heraldic achievement may tell us as genealogists, knowing now how to determine their colors, where to look to identify a coat of arms, as well as gleaning all we can from the clues an armorial achievement might offer us, where might we look for heraldic clues about our own family line? Among your family heirlooms, you might find coats of arms on book plates or armorial bindings, maps, engraved stationery, sofa pillows and cushions, armorial silver and armorial china, glasses and table linen, wax seals and the seal rings used to make them, armorial painting, embroideries and needlework, playing tokens of mother of pearl, the 18th and 19th century equivalent of a poker chip, crested china, decorative item, little tchotchke, some of which can be a bit amusing, as this poor fellow on the right, who apparently has a headache. Armorial buttons and engraved watches. and heraldic jewelry, like this brooch with a family's coat of arms. Memorial plaques, both older and newer, and which may have more than just the deceased coats of arms, but may also display arms from his parents, grandparents, etc., thus suggesting new lines of research. Tombstones, both old, here Diedrich van der Merwede, who died in 1458, and new, John van der Merwede, dated 1988. The same coat of arms, here and here, used more than 500 years apart. Or armorial embellishments to architecture on pediments, gates, gatehouses, etc. You know, a little something on the family's country cottage or summer home. Well, maybe if your family's home is a lot fancier than mine. But you might find a coat of arms carved on a lintel over a door or a keystone in an archway, done in metal or ironwork, set in a stained glass window, painted on a wall or ceiling, or on a decorative fire screen, even tile work or armorial mosaics. Sometimes you may even find a temporary display of heraldry, very popular in Victorian times. These hatchments, they're called, are displayed for a year after the death of someone. They can tell us not only the name, but which spouse was recently deceased. Here, it was the wife who survives the husband, because behind the husband's side of the coat of arms, it's painted black. Behind the wife, it's still white to indicate that she is still living. Now, while you're unlikely to discover coats of arms in all of these places, they are the most likely places to begin to look for heraldry in your family. So, in this modern day and age, why would anyone want a coat of arms? The answer, I believe, is that in this transitory life, people are still looking for ways of laying down a solid foundation for their family. Heraldry is traditional, fun, colorful, historic, and respected. It dawned on me one day that these family crests are powerful familial emblems that I could appropriate. My interest in heraldry came through my interest in genealogy. Much has already been written about the value of heraldry in creating powerful symbols of family connection. And, well, I wanted some of that, something visual to signify my family roots. And what would or could you do with a coat of arms? Either inherited or, if you don't find one in your own family, creating a new one for yourself. Well, emulating colonial and Victorian society by painting a coat of arms on the doors of the modern carriage. For example, the family beetle, or from where I come down in Texas, the family pickup truck, just doesn't seem right somehow. But how may you use heraldry to embellish your own genealogy and your life? The most obvious answer, of course, is our armorial family tree. Something else here, it can be useful in organizing your genealogical research. A friend of mine out in California created what isn't exactly a family tree. It's a tool for testing a genealogical hypothesis: the descent of his grandmother from the illegitimate children of some of the kings of England. He uses it because, he says, it helps you stay focused, validate lines, notice illogical connections, test errors, prove arguments, and confirm cadences. Additionally, as he notes, it also looks pretty. Remember that we said a coat of arms is like a name tag or photo ID? It's a personal logo, if you will, which can be used anywhere you would want to use such an identifying mark. For example, as here, a letterhead logo. And of course, all of the places which have been suggested to look for coats of arms are also places to use coats of arms. Bookplate, bookend, stained glass, silverware, china, including coffee mugs, seals, portraits, embroideries, and quilts, cufflinks, tie pins and tie clips, and jewelry, business cards, a coat of arms carved onto a pediment over a gate or doorway might seem a little over the top, but you could certainly do something that would have a similar effect on a more modest scale. Here's a man who's created an entire desk set incorporating his coat of arms. You can see his shield here on the picture frame, the pen holder, the bookmark, the letter opener, and paperweight. I have seen coats of arms. Skipped one. Another practical use of heraldry that has cropped up in recent years because of COVID has been armorial face masks, which may be decorated with national, state, or personal coats of arms. I have seen coats of arms laser carved into the body of a skateboard, stamped into a smartphone case, and painted on the face of an electric guitar. And now you have too. You can even make your coat of arms edible, as with this birthday cake. And then for those who were really into their coats of arms, you can have them tattooed onto yourself as the ultimate self-identifier. Now, not all the uses of heraldry have to be tangible. Computers, too, can be a place for heraldic display, as a desktop wallpaper or in the changing pictures of a screensaver, or as here on a couple of family history websites on the internet. The potential uses of heraldry are really only limited by your own imagination. Now, before I finish up today, I'd like to discuss a couple of common misconceptions about heraldry. The first, propounded by various heraldic authors over the years, is that the colors and charges have specific meaning. They will tell you that red is the blood of the enemy slain in battle, blue is purity and splendor, that a wild boar is a man of a bold spirit, skillful, politic in warlike feats. Well, I hate to disappoint you, because while elaborate and quite interesting stories have sometimes been created to explain the choice of charges in a coat of arms, it really just isn't so. People have even written entire books like this one, purporting to tell you what the various heraldic symbols mean. But unless the owner or the designer of the arms left us notes explaining why the charges in the arms were chosen as they were, we really don't know and can only speculate, probably incorrectly, about the meanings behind a coat of arms. Please note that the following descriptions and meanings are gleaned from a variety of sources, some of which disagree on those meanings. The most commonly accepted meanings are given, but scholars vary in their opinion concerning the reliability of any commonly held historic meanings for coats of arms and crests. That said, there's an exception to that general rule. This exception is what are called canting arms, where the charge or charges used are a pun on the name of the family. As only a few examples to give you an idea, we have the hand and the roosters, or cock, of the arms of Hancock, the bow in the arms of Bovin, and the wings in the arms of Wingfield. Sometimes the cant or the pun crosses languages. In one instance of this, we have the arms of the Arundel family, which has a type of swallow, which in French is called a hirondelle, which sounds a lot like Arundel. The other common misconception I'd like to address is the idea usually stated as your family coat of arms, or worse, your family crest, a coat of arms for a surname. Generally, this is propounded by people who want to sell you your family coat of arms at a price. In one especially egregious example, a company hawked sweatshirts with coats of arms printed on them saying, "Wear a coat of arms for your surname proudly, as knights of old did centuries ago." But really, I have to wonder, did knights of old centuries ago really wear sweatshirts with their arms on them? Anyway, As a quick review of any of the armorials we discussed earlier will demonstrate, there is no such thing as a coat of arms for a surname. For example, looking in Burke's General Armory under the name Warren shows us that there are almost 60 different coats of arms borne by individuals of that surname. Here in America, it is supposed that all of the same surname constitute one family and are hence entitled to the arms. This idea is clearly erroneous. Identity of surname raises no presumption of identity of origin. A coat of arms is inherited by the descendants of the first lawful possessor and by them only. Whoever seeks to establish a claim on the ground of inheritance must prove his descent precisely as he would in claiming a title or a piece of land. So, just as not everyone named Ford, including former President Gerald R. Ford, actor Harrison Ford, who I saw today on TV in an ad for a Jeep, even though, as he says, even though my last name is Ford, and the late singer Tennessee Ernie Ford, none of these are heirs to the Henry Ford fortune. And just like that, not everyone sharing a surname may rightfully use a coat of arms borne by someone with that same surname. I would like to thank you for listening. I hope that I've been able to shed at least a little light on this pictorial genealogy we call heraldry. And now, after throwing all of that at you, are there any questions?
I saw a documentary years ago where somebody was creating a new coat of arms, and he had to, when he was done, he had to register it. Is that still true, or?
It depends on where.
This is England.
In Scotland, yes, definitely. In England, yeah, they'd like you to.
Right.
In Canada, you can. In the United States, there is no heraldic authority here. So it's open for you to use as you see fit.
Yeah.
When we were traveling in Ireland, we saw stands where you could buy your coat of arms or your heraldry. Is that legitimate, or is that just a way to make money?
Unless you're dealing with the Office of the Chief Herald of Ireland, which is a part of the National Library, it's just a way to make money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's in spite of the little glitches at the beginning with getting Zoom to work properly, it has been fun for me, and it's exciting for me to be able to share some of my little hobby with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.